Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth, and today we're going to talk about lectures. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. I have been involved in this improving undergraduate STEM education proposal. I'm not actually involved with writing it, but if it gets funded, I'd be involved with helping design and facilitate some workshops. And it's been fascinating to talk with these people in a different field than I'm in. Because they know all these people, you know, the active learning and the inclusive teaching people and the different concepts, and it's just kind of a foreign language to me at this point. And so I'm really enjoying this little immersion into it as we're just having discussions about how to structure their proposal. So that's been really fun.
That's super interesting because my part of my week update was I attended a workshop about like STEM equity stuff, and it's just super interesting where I'm super into all of this. I don't totally know what's going on, but like I'm really liking it, and like it's just that feeling of kind of letting it wash over you but not totally getting all of the stuff. So yeah, I'm
into it.
Yeah,
totally.
My other week update sort of relates to my quote. So I just was like in my head having this like love letter to libraries and how great they are and how much I love libraries. So
libraries are awesome.
They're so good. And like I just I did buy a secondhand book of the Shadow and Bone series.
Okay.
And it was like so good. And then but I don't want to buy 6 more books. Do you know what I mean? Both space wise. And then just on the library website, order it in. It's there 2 days later. Go and pick it up. Just so great. And I think I told you last time about my daughters being into the comics. And again, like, you know, because they'll get a graphic novel and read it in like 10 minutes. So it's so just going to the library and getting a big stack of Dogman comics and then
I love it.
Off you go. So yeah, libraries are just magical. They're so great.
Do you go to the local public library? Is that what you're
and they were so great during COVID too, because they just had like you could order it online, go sit in your car and then call them and they would bring it out and put it on the table and then go back in. And yeah. And in Ireland too, I was a big library user because it's just so great. I love it. And apparently like it just gives me hope for humanity whenever there's a library and it's well utilized by people. And this is a completely made up statistic that I've heard from someone else, so it has I can't back it up, but apparently yeah, exactly, apparently like having a library in a neighborhood actually increases book sales in the like, so it's like not like it takes away from booksellers or anything, like it actually just enhances the whole thing. And that's cool. I've definitely had that experience of like either getting a book from the library and getting into a series and then buying the rest of them, or you know what I mean. So it's just all reading love. And did you read Matilda when you were younger?
Of course.
Yeah,
yes, that was my favorite movie for ages.
It's just so good. That book is fantastic, and the movie. But I just really remember the description of her, like when she starts taking herself to the library, and it just is like this wonderland. And so yeah, I love libraries. That's awesome. Love them. Okay, so sorry, that's my quote then. It's like it's a snippet of dialogue from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and Hermione has dashed off to the library, and Harry's like, but why is she going to go to the library? And Ron, so because that's what Hermione does, Ron says, shrugging. When in doubt, go to the library. So I'm gonna not just to find out about basilisks, but also a book you might not know you wanted. So yeah,
I love it. What a great reminder. I haven't been to the library in a while. Maybe I should go. I love libraries too.
Yeah, it's so good. And I really like now that they've kind of, the whole online stuff is so effective. Because you can like, you were probably too young to remember this, but like going to a video store, and then you would go to the video store and then completely forget any movies you ever wanted to see, and you just wander around. So like that happens to me a bit in the library. So I like the aspect that you can look stuff up online and like order things and sort of be prepared for
I love it.
Whatever choice paralysis comes over me. So So today, we are talking about, I think, like, I guess what we're trying to do is sort of define terminology a little bit. And I think especially for listeners who are, I know when I was doing my PhD, I was unaware of any of these things. And then also, if you're in a different country to the US, definitions are different. Like job titles mean different things in different places.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So we wanted to start off our job etymology series by talking about lecturers. So from the student perspective in the classroom, the lecturers and the tenure line faculty are both teaching the class, and it's often not even clear which is which. So the main difference is the tenure line faculty are doing teaching, research, and service, whereas the lecturers are focused on teaching, and so usually they teach more classes, more teaching units, because they're not also doing the research and service parts of the tenure line jobs. Usually lecturers are also more temporary, not always, but they're short-term jobs that could be renewed, and so they can be used to fill, as enrollment changes and numbers of classes changes. You need more lecturers one year and fewer the next year, and so it's often a job by people right out of grad school or sometimes undergrad going onward to something else afterwards. But other times there's lecturers who've been doing it for years and years and are really a key part of the department. Do you have anything to add to that, Ruth?
And another term that can be used to describe lecturers is adjunct faculty. So I've seen that come up in job descriptions also. So that's something to kind of watch out for.
All right. Yes. So what's working for you in regards to lecturers?
Right. And I think we kind of talked about this too, that it's tricky to have our usual format of working. Well, but this actually worked for me because I was a lecturer for 3 years before I got the job here. And so I think it's a great, awesome way to get a lot of good experience, and I think for me, the place that I worked was a big institution. And so there was like 10 other faculty teaching the same course as me. And that was huge in terms of just getting, like, you could kind of take bits and pieces from everybody who was willing to give it. And, you kind of helped me find my teaching style, I think, which was super
that's awesome.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. I think having teaching only faculty is wonderful and should be, like, it's a super important part. Obviously, I mean, that's what we're here to do, is all the teaching. And so I think, and I think for somebody with that job, that can be also a good thing. So like for me, I was teaching 15 units in my lecture job. And then I was like, sweet, man, coming here and only teaching 12 units. This is going to be way easier. And I did not anticipate how much work all the other stuff was. So, and I like that other stuff and it's fine. But I think it can be, a good thing to just focus on your teaching. And so that can be really good. Sure. And so I think the other thing in terms of working and what really worked for me as a lecturer was I also was mindful of like getting lots of different, like as many different classes of experience, because I was in my head, I knew I wanted to apply for a tenure line job. So I was kind of using it strategically. And another thing that I really appreciated when I was a lecturer was there was a lot of salary negotiations and all sorts of things going on. And I really remember that the people in that department who were tenured were very aware that they had a different job security and made it a priority to speak about lecturer issues that maybe lecturers didn't feel like they could bring up. And I just, that meant a lot to me at the time. And I thought it was really important. And so like there was even, I think, talk of a strike, but it was clear that maybe if you don't have full job security, you might not feel comfortable going. And I appreciated how aware some of the tenure line faculty were about that. So that was a good thing.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's really great. And that's really interesting. So you're talking about having found your teaching philosophy through this scenario where a whole bunch of people are teaching the same classes and you can really like see what they're all doing and pick and choose what resonates with you. That's really
right. And like we even had, like there was even a weekly meeting of all of the instructors for this one class, and people would come together and it was super helpful because it would be like, well, I'm just starting momentum. I really noticed students struggle with this. And, as someone, that first semester when you're teaching is so rough. you know, it was a really nice security blanket to kind of have that. So I think it's a really great way to get experience. And I think for people hiring, like it can only help to have teaching experience. So I think that's wonderful.
Totally.
And as a job in itself, it's completely, you know, fulfilling and like, you know, there was actually a person at the institution where I was before who was offered a tenure line position there, and they turned it down and stayed with teaching only because that's where they wanted to focus their energies. And so, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So what's working for you?
Well, one thing that I really noticed, so because my job description includes teaching, research, and service, and the lecturer's job description focuses on teaching, sometimes I've been in group projects with a mixture of lecturers and tenure line faculty, and we're all going to this common goal of some teaching thing, but it is really a project, like we're developing a class or we're developing an activity or something. And so keeping in mind that because we have these different job descriptions, we have different things we can put in our, you know, like I have my retention, tenure, and promotion file that includes a bunch of service, and all that can count as service, and it's not the same way for lecturers. And I really found it valuable. One of the leaders in one of those projects, it was a funded project, and so there had been hourly pay going to everybody who was working on the project as we worked on the project. And then as we started to run out of funding, the idea was the lecturers would continue to get the hourly pay, and everyone else would start just putting it in the service part of retention, tenure, and promotion files. And so I really appreciated that emphasis on the fact that because the lecturers, this isn't part of their job description, it's above and beyond, we should be sure to support that and their participation in this project by continuing to give them the hourly funding. So I just really thought that was a really sensible approach to handling this difference in what is in our job descriptions when we're working on these projects together.
I think that's perfect. And I think like it's something that sometimes we're like, but we do it for the love of our job. But it's like, it's really just because we want to put it in our tenure file. Like, and it's a combination of those things, but there is an exchange there. And, but the thing I really like about that example is, it's not somebody saying, oh, but then people who this isn't their job aren't going to want to participate and not even inviting them. So I think it's super, I like that it's like an acknowledgement that people are getting different things out of it, but that, you know, people, they still may want to participate anyway, even if they aren't.
We all want to do the project. We're just getting different benefits from it, totally.
Yeah, perfect. So I think, and I think that's where ignoring the differences would be like harmful, right? So I think that's,
totally.
Yep.
All right, so what are you working on?
I think the thing, like for me, I was trying to think about when I was preparing for this, like why didn't I want to stay as a lecturer? And for me, I think it really came down to issues with like permanence and my my visa, like my permission to work here. And, you know, it was going to be easier to do with a permanent job. So that was a big driver for me. And I think then the issue of maybe, you know, I think it can be quite difficult for people when... So this wasn't an issue where I worked before because there was so many classes. Everyone always had a full load. But it is tricky for people if you don't know semester to semester, if you're going to have a full teaching load. And I don't think this is ideal, but I think when people don't live in really rural places like we are, people kind of can make up a full teaching load by working at different institutions, which sounds incredibly difficult because 2 half jobs is way more than a full job for sure. So I think that's, you know, that is one thing that's something to consider. I think one thing I found really frustrating and not reasonable as a lecturer was like there wasn't really salary increases as you went along, which seems ridiculous because obviously, you know, if how you are as a teacher, your first semester is quite different after 6 years, you know, and so that should be acknowledged. So I think that is a bit of a thing. And then the other thing, now, and I don't really know this, honestly, if I wasn't allowed to do professional development, I'm sure I would have been, but it just wasn't, maybe I didn't have the same motivation to seek it out because I wasn't trying to develop the tenure file. But that's something I find really helps me. Like when I said at the beginning, I did this STEM equity workshop, and as I have been sharing most volubly, I'm very burnt out. And it was like, I could feel the little seeds of like interest blossoming again. And, you know, professional development is such a good way to stay kind of motivated and happy about your job. So I think I would like to see more opportunities for lecturers to participate and also for that to be rewarded. So I think that's a crucial part of it.
Yeah. So how would they be rewarded, do you think? What would be the best system for that? It could obviously be a financial thing, or it could be instead of some units, or it could be leading towards some promotion maybe. That would be cool.
Yeah, I think units would be great as well. And I think, you know, like more institutions I think are having tenured teaching only positions. And it just feels really like a good investment. You know, because I think, and again, I think it depends where you are. But like if you're at an R1 institution where they graduate a bazillion PhD students every year and all of those PhD students would love to teach one semester, then you can be a bit more cavalier. But like where we are, we don't have a huge pool of PhDs floating around to just pop in and teach lecture. You know, so I think it would be better to have like more of a career pathway that people can feel stable in, so that they will, you know, so I think that would be crucial too.
That makes a lot of sense, because like in the chemistry department, we have a bunch of core lecturers who've been around for ages and are really key members of the department. And then we have some other lecturers that come and go and are here for a few semesters and then are gone. And that both are very important, but they're kind of different roles, you know? But they're still under the same job title. So I can see what you mean about maybe having the teaching focused here to stay for a while.
Yes.
People, and then the teaching focused getting some experience and then moving on people, that those could be different. That's interesting. That's
the exact articulation of what I want to say. Because I think for people who do just want to do a semester and get experience, it's perfect. Do you know what I mean? Perfect. To have a temporary job. And then, but then for people who are really invested and like really, really valuable to our institutions, they should kind of get more permanence. For sure.
That's interesting. That leads perfectly into what I'm working on, which is our lecturers who've been in the department for a long time are the go-to people for teaching Gen Chem labs. And so periodically I teach a Gen Chem lab. It's only happened twice, but both times I've really heavily relied on these outstanding lecturers who know so much about the Gen Chem labs and what the students get tripped up on and what makes the labs work really well and have them get really good data. And so I've just shadowed them and I've copied their board notes. And so I guess that has been fantastic. And I want to utilize them more. And so maybe get more insight from them about what they know about our first year students and our other people taking Gen Chem labs and what's covered in the lab and what the students really take away from it and what they don't really take away from it. And maybe that would be helpful for me to apply to my upper level class where the students come after Gen Chem. And if I had a little bit more context, which I think they are the people in the lab interacting one-on-one with the students as they're going through these experiences in the lab. So I think they, tenure line faculty teach those labs as well, but a lot of our lecturers are the main ones who do it all the time and are really, really good at it. So just utilizing that resource more is what I'm working on.
Right. And it's tricky, right? Because I think we would gain a lot by having our longer term lecturers more involved in like department meetings. And there's this weird fine line between it's not part of your job description to attend. Do you know what I mean? And so maybe it should be.
We don't want to force you to come.
Right. But I think, for people who, like in our department, I think the lecturers teach, like they interact with more students than anybody.
Totally.
So I think that their insight and input about things would be extremely valuable. So it's kind of tricky. Maybe just the answer is one of their units should be about, you know what I mean? Like there should be no service requirements as in, so it's tricky. And I think there's a line too. I think I've heard some lecturers say they don't feel welcome to attend things and some lecturers are welcome to attend but not expected. So it's like that line between we value your time and you don't have to do this, but we appreciate your insight. And so it's just this kind of fine balance of
totally
acknowledging the job difference. Yeah.
In our department, we often have, full department meetings. Everyone should be there if you can be there. And then we have tenure line should be there. Everyone else, you can come if you want to, but you don't need to. And they're I appreciate that it's clear whether
Right.
we're talking about a full-blown department meeting or we're talking about this specific issue is going to be worked on. And if you have interest in that issue, then show up,
Yeah. Well, because one of the other things at the previous institution where I worked that I appreciated was, even though like it was these yearly contracts, there was like a kind of a career progression in mind, as in like when I came in, you were assigned a mentor who was a tenure line faculty member.
Cool.
And it was all really well thought out. Like that person would never be involved in evaluating you, so you could sort of tell them whatever you wanted. And there was quite a lot of structure around supporting the lecturers who came in.
Cool.
And I definitely
That's
appreciated that for sure. So I think when we can have that, so I think maybe just to sum up, like the purpose of this episode is to sort of start our series about talking about what different job titles are for people, especially people who are starting out, but then also, people in different countries having different definitions, and then maybe just what to think about, the pros and cons of doing that job, and then the things to be aware of maybe about interacting with people who have those positions. So we'd love to hear from people who either are working as lecturers or are thinking about it, and what do you think about it?
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ruth.
Thanks. Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows, or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.